conflict and just be with our relationships with our children, with our spouses, and with our friends as we think on how to honor you and in how we speak and think about one another. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so Greg is out of town, so we're just pausing what's that series called? How We Got the Bible? Yeah, How We Got the Bible series. So we're just pausing that. The new members class just wrapped up, so some people will be in here. And, of course, I don't know where everyone else is. Greg's out of town. Owen's out of town. And, yeah, so we just thought, well, what is it, in October we actually start this? So today, I was just talking to Josh a little bit about a couple things to talk about, and then just kind of get some ideas from you guys. So it's kind of a laid-back Sunday school in preparation for our conflict seminar. So, yeah, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about with that is how we do conflict is really important. So successful relationships, do you guys think they avoid conflicts? Yes. No. Successful relationships lean into conflicts. They deal with them well. I was thinking about this too, that it's not like sometimes you avoid them. It's okay sometimes to avoid conflicts. You'll have to figure out and discern when that appropriate time is. Sometimes it's good, like brothers, to fight about something. And you got to figure out when that appropriate time is. Sometimes, some of us, on our own personalities, we run away from passionate conflicts. Do you guys do that? You get uncomfortable when emotions get high. Or it's not even emotions, it's like tones get high. You hear boys fighting in the Danaher household, and you're like, oh man, they must hate each other. Like, no, they're just passionate people. Is that a bad thing, having passion in a conflict? What do you guys think? What's your experience? When I do teaching, I think you'll notice when Josh gets there too, is that we're not used to like just lecturing people. we want that interaction with you guys. So if you have thoughts, comments, ideas that come up, just throw up your hand or whatever, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, what makes you guys uncomfortable in conflict? That's one thing I'd like you to think about. What makes you uncomfortable in a conflict? What makes a conflict bad even, which is a different question. It's a corollary question. You might be uncomfortable and it can still be good. And that's good to just be uncomfortable. But it might be uncomfortable and it's a negative conflict as well. And so I'm going to give you guys a couple things to think about today before we, between the times we actually start this, is how would you define a bad conflict? It's one question to think about. What does a bad conflict look like? I can't call on Josh because he knows the answer. Adam, what's a bad conflict look like? Oh, that's even louder when I go down.
I don't know, based on something meaningless? Arguing whether ketchup or mustard is best?
Hey, listen, those are legit arguments. Clearly, Team Mustard wins. Well, that's also a good thing, actually. I'm going to write some ideas down here. Did my wife say no? Is that what this happens? Is that why you're laughing? She likes ketchup. Well, pray for her. There are arguments that sometimes some of you like them. They're fun and they're matters of taste. And it can be fun to argue with Adam about ketchup and mustard, and it's not very serious. But you can still say things during the conflict that actually make it a bad conflict during that argument. Then you might actually go from a matter of taste to now harming one another. You could do that. So what makes a conflict bad?
That'd be like arguments with fallacies thrown in there?
Maybe. I guess in a relational argument, I don't call out a fallacy as a bad thing because they're trying to say something. Amy, is that right? Yes. Yeah, that's really good. Feeling unheard, rejected, realizing you didn't listen to the other person. Mindy?
I was going to say, if the passion escalates to where you're attacking the other person and you're not even dealing with the content
Yeah.
the conflict is about, then you've lost your way.
Yeah, if you attack the other person, That's why I said a fallacy. But you have to realize one thing to help start making you guys think about is that your relational arguments, they have a lot of layers to them, and there's not just if you feel like you're talking about something and then they attack you, it's like there's something going on there. It's not a logical argument necessarily. I mean, it is logical, but it's not logical. So it's not good to approach an argument with a person, especially a spouse or a child, as if this is a deductive proof. Certainly they can go in there, but there's so much behind there that I hope over the weeks that Josh and I do this, you'll be able to uncover what those things are. That even if somebody attacks me, I might say, that's interesting. I wonder what's going back behind that attack. And not just be like, hey, that's a fallacy. Like, well, arguing about the dishes is not fallacious. Like, there's not fallacious arguments about the dishes. There are things that might be bad to bring in about the dishes, but that doesn't make an argument bad. What makes an argument bad? These are good things like rejecting someone, attacking someone's person, feeling rejected. What else? You've all been in them. I think my mom had her hand up.
I was just going to say the same thing, attacking a person.
Yeah, those are good things. One thing you could look up between now and then, so I'm just going to give a bunch of homework to you guys as we go through this. But one thing I'd like you to look at is probably, I think this model is really helpful, Gottman's Four Horsemen. They're Jewish secular scholars, and they use the language of the Four Horsemen of the apocalypse because if those things are all present, that in their research pretty much signifies the ending of a relationship. Like it might be holding on, but there's like a 93% chance that that relationship will dissolve over time. Those things are like criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Those are the four things. So criticism, defensiveness, you stonewall. Men do that a lot. Women criticize a lot, which is fine, by the way. Some of you, as I say that, are going to be like, is he attacking me? No. The research will all say, guess what is actually good in a marriage? Guess who criticizes the most in a marriage? And it's not a bad thing. The women. The women, on research and observation, they criticize the most. I mean, and that kind of makes sense, right? We can laugh about this, that if you go to a single guy's house, he just will have the exact same setup in his house for a decade if he could. And he'll just have a mattress on the floor with a water bottle next to it, and he's completely content with that. And he'll just not complain about it. He'll just be like, that's my life, I don't care. There's nothing wrong. And so there's nothing wrong, though, to note that women tend to criticize, and in a lot of the scholarship, in marriages where the women do criticize the most, they're actually happier marriages. They're more content. But it then has to deal with how you deal with those criticisms. And so, there's a difference that we'll have to explain and help you guys practice on the difference between a criticism and a complaint. The difference between criticizing someone and complaining about something is very different. One's destructive and the other's more constructive and helpful. So a complaint is fine. A criticism, when you attack your spouse or you attack your child, that will be the destructive element of it. So one thing, look up the Four Horsemen. And one thing to think about is a criticism, and here's your first little tool, is paying attention. I want you to start paying attention to this. Because inevitably as we teach conflict, I'm not going to probably ask you, like, what does your spouse do that bugs you? It's more like learn about yourself and learn about the reactions your spouse or your children have to you. Pay attention to those, and then fix yourself before you go be like, Jonathan, you need to fix all these things. Now that he's here, I can pick on him. So that's not a good thing to do, is noticing all the bad things of your spouse or your children, but fix first yourself and then help them out. So the harsh startup would be one thing. So Four Horsemen, harsh startup is the second part. You start a conflict by just criticizing somebody. Usually indicative of saying, like, you never, you always, right? You walk in, there the dishes aren't done. That's a common fight, I guess. And you say, you never pick up this house. I always pick this house up. Things like that. You guys ever done that? Have you guys ever said that before? I'm trying to think if I did. Have I said? I probably said something like that. Even, by the way, if you learn these things, I'm just going to tell you, you're still going to make mistakes. You're not going to be like, oh, dang it, I'm so perfect now. And then also, as you guys get in conflicts with Josh and I, just, don't be like, don't you teach this? Or like, hey, listen, we also have emotions and feelings too, and sometimes you mess up. Hopefully over time you get better, but don't expect perfection from yourself or other people, just growth. So if you start, as you walk in there, right, and I was listening to John Deloney. He's a Ramsey guy, psychologist, and he has a talk show, and somebody called in and was saying, she's a stay-at-home mom. This is a good example because we have a lot of stay-at-home moms. Husband works in like IT or something, spreadsheets, comes home, and immediately is annoyed. They got 2 small children under the age of 2, and immediately criticizes a mess on the floor. And is like, starts laying into his wife. I say laying in because, nobody wants to hear that when you come home, your spouse comes home and is like, hey, there's a mess here. Let's talk about how you can fix that. You're like, and Deloney, I think, is right. He just said, well, why doesn't the guy just spend 15 minutes vacuuming up the house and if it really bothers him? So if you come home and just criticize a mess that your spouse has in their house, in your guys' house, and it bothers you, that's probably not the best way to start. Is just be like, let's talk about ways that you can pick up better after yourself or after the children. Why might that not be a good thing? What do you guys think? 'Cause you've probably all been a part of that, one party or the other. Have you seen your spouse, if you've been the one that criticized, have you seen them being like, oh, yes, thank you so much. That was very helpful. I love you so much right now. Or they immediately, you can see them, and they're just like, ugh. They're already stressed. You're the first adult they've talked to in the day. And then you immediately just punch them in the face, verbally, right? Don't ever do that. Well, actually, I was looking at Danae, like, if Danae would destroy Adam if that happened. She's like an 8-stripe white belt. So, if you've been either side of that, have you noticed that your spouse just really doesn't want to engage with you at that point? And wherever the conversation goes, it's always negative. It's very hard to recover from that. So as we call that a harsh start, it's like the first 30 seconds of your conversation dictate sort of the outcome of your conversation. It's very hard when you get attacked, especially if you're tired, you're emotionally drained, you have your little cup and it's pretty full, and then someone piles on more. And you're like, yeah, let me not take that as a personal attack right now. Good luck, right? When you're rested, sure. But at the end of the day, you're tired. It's going to be very hard. So let me give you sort of a remedy for this. Here's a little tool for you. They're very easy. It's like a gentle startup. Instead of saying you come home and you're like, Danae, why can't you pick up this house? That's very rude, right? That's going to attack somebody. Instead, do this. Just X, Y, and Z. Just think of it as a little formula. In the context X, I feel Y, and I need Z. Like, state your positive need. It's very hard to get upset at somebody. I mean, you can. But it's harder to get upset at somebody if you just say, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now, and this is what I feel like I need right now. But you got to be really careful with this because my students pointed this out. They're pretty smart. So I was like, whoa, you guys. But they pointed this out that you might start with, hey, I feel like this because of you. Don't do that. Like, I feel really stressed out when I see a mess around the house because you're lazy. Like, okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, don't do that. But if you say, hey, I come home and, I feel stressed out seeing a mess around the house, and what can we do to have it picked up, more tidy? That's fine. Now you can have a conversation about that, and it's not necessarily her fault or your fault. And it could be that this person gave 100% of their effort that day, and there's still a mess in the house. Is that possible? Yeah. That's totally possible. That your ideal is not met because even though they gave 100% of what they had that day, it's not like 50% because they didn't get to that one task that was on your list, but it was literally 100% of their effort. you might have done it differently and got other things done and other things not done. That's just what they gave. So it's not helpful to then criticize it and basically tell them, you didn't try hard enough today. That's not a helpful thing. So gentle startup, context X, your feeling, and then what your positive need is in some way. And that could honestly just be, just go get a vacuum, husband, and go pick up the mess, and then talk to your family. Or go work out because apparently you're too emotionally aroused, and then go talk to your family. So careful how you start up. That's one technique to think about. So pay attention these next few weeks, how you guys start your conversations with one another. Anytime, delete the words you always, you never from your vocabulary. Because you have to think, like, as Roger's pointing out fallacies, is that ever true when you say that to somebody? You never pick up after the kids. Like, is that even possibly true? Or you say it to your children. This is also parents of your kids, right? You never pick your room up. Like, they know that's not true when you say that to them. And they feel that. They're like, well, that's unfair. So, of course, they're going to escalate with you. Because you just did some hasty generalization on them, right? So think about also, not just spouses, think of how you talk to your kids, too. Any questions on that one? Harsh startups. Do you guys notice that? This is going to be a weird thing to do. Okay, every tool we'll probably give you is going to be weird because it's not normal for the last 30 years of your life, or kids, the last 8, 12, 15, 18 years of your life. You've had bad patterns, and now you're like, let me try a new thing. And you're like, I don't know about this. It feels weird. Good. Because your bad patterns aren't very helpful. Will?
I think both sides of that tool is like, I think it's easy also if the conversation starts up with a nice startup to take that personally, like take that as if it wasn't a nice
Yes.
startup.
Yeah.
So both sides have to be actually hearing what the other person's saying and not
Yeah.
turning that into like, oh, well, you're saying it that way, but there's this underlying implication.
Yeah, what Will's pointing out is true. You could be very nice and gentle, and your spouse is just having a bad day, and they take it personally. But you're like, and then you're like, that didn't work. Well, look at the context of, you guys might have other things going on. Might just be a really long day, a bad day. You got to put some of your fights in that context, right? Some of your arguments in that context that sometimes you're not feeling well. It's like making the same mistake police officers make, thinking everyone's a criminal, because they meet the people that have their worst day of their life usually is when they meet them, and they think everyone's like that. Like that's not true. Yeah, Will?
It might take a while for that approach to like change the tone of your interactions. Like, okay, well, this guy, so
Yeah.
never again.
Yeah, it might take time, like Will was saying. It might take time to integrate that, to try to just express. What I want you to think about is instead of criticizing someone, try to dig in and figure out what your positive need is. It's fine. And this kind of gets to a corollary question that I want you guys, you and your spouses to think about. Or if you're not married, think about it in your future relationship. What do you want your household to feel like when you get home? What do you want it to feel like when you get home? I can't tell you what you want it to feel like. That's something that you guys have to think about, each of you, and then work backwards. How do you create that? Do you want to get home, stiff arm the kids to get to your spouse? They're like, Dad, don't care. Where's my wife? Right? And do you want to just check in with each other, and then you talk, have a little adult conversation, and then you can engage the kids. Whatever you want it to feel like, work backwards from there. And sometimes, just be honest, trade-offs are real, and not every ideal that you have in your mind is accomplishable right now. When you have 4 small children at the house, which all of you do, then expecting the house to look like it's spick and span, that's great. If you want to pick up a second job and get a house cleaner, and Danae has a house cleaning business now, so that's a good plug, yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. So yeah, if you want to pick up some extra work on the side and hire a house cleaner, so the house can be your ideal sense, great. But there's trade-offs of you have 4 small children, and it might take time to train them to clean up your house, and even then it's not going to be perfect because it's not how you wanted it or you would do it. And sometimes, you know, your husband, your wife is cleaning and it's not exactly how you want it. There's trade-offs, but you literally can't do everything, can you, in the house? Yeah, John?
See, maybe this is too early to give a question like this, but what if the positive need, like one of the parties doesn't quite see the value on the same page?
Like, what's an example of a not seeing the positive need?
Well, maybe it could be something as simple as like keeping the house clean.
Yeah.
So one party might feel more affected by something like that as opposed to the other. So what sort of compromise, or how do you go about compromising for something like that?
Well, I wouldn't think immediately I have to compromise. I usually don't like compromises because then nobody's happy. But what I think about is first, that need is good to put out there. What's behind it? Like, why do you need the house to be clean? What does that say to you? Maybe that is just like your stress, right? Sometimes we have different levels of how much noise we can take. Most of us turn the radio off when you reverse nowadays, just so you can see better, right? Especially when parking. My wife's car does this now. I didn't know this. Her car's newer than mine, and you put it in reverse, and the radio goes down. I'm like, oh, this is so great. I can see better. So what I mean, like, is physiologically you might just have some differences. You might need to figure out why, like, where does that come from? Maybe maybe somebody grew up in a really messy house and they just can't stand it, and the mess stresses them out to the max. And you just have to love your spouse, and so just pitch in and clean up the house more. But of course, then you got to think about the trade-offs. Like, is that possible? But what I'd say is if it's like, well, this is hard to accomplish, get at the underlying goals and needs. So through this, hopefully Josh and I will help you guys see that there is the express need, but under there's a lot more stuff that most people don't even think about, aren't even aware of, that could be rooted in just who you are, your personality, your background, your values that you never actually figured out where that came from. Could be how you were raised, or it could be a response to how you were raised. You could have a slight inverse trauma response to your parents telling you to, or just leaving you alone and having a mess, and you're like, I have to have a perfectly clean house. And then you got to figure out, what does that mean for you? That's where you got to go talk to someone like Josh. I mean, you can't talk to Josh, but Josh can reference you to someone to figure out those kind of things. But we can give you some tools to think about that. But that's why I wouldn't say, like, do you need to just go straight to a compromise? It's often the problem with compromises. If that's your go-to, is just like, let's split the difference so that we both are unhappy. Rather than trying to figure out what's behind and beneath that, so can we address that need somehow? Maybe it is in a more creative way. Maybe it is just, let's hire a house cleaner in this case. And then we just suck it up in other places in our finances. Yeah, Adam?
One thing I'd love for you guys to cover over the weeks
Yes.
is how to deal with like baggage. So especially with spouses, but maybe even with older kids, just you've lived life together, you've sinned against each other a million times, and you've had a lot of bad arguments. And like, even if one party's coming in a really nice, kind way,
Yeah.
phrases they use might have some baggage from an argument 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and so just how to deal with
That's a good one.
context in a disagreement.
Okay. Yeah. Baggage. Yeah. So Adam was asking about baggage. Yes, that is straight up baggage, Josh. So for those of you watching, Adam was asking about baggage. How do you deal with baggage, relational history between you and your spouse or you and your kids, the things you've inflicted on each other. And then Josh, of course, brought up just get the basics in place, right? As another baggage thing. So we'll talk about that. As you guys think about stuff, I'll take a few minutes, think about some things so I can write them down for Josh and I to deal with. I want to give you 3 more things. Well, actually, I guess 2 more. I already asked you the 4th one. For you guys to figure out, how do you want the house to feel when you come home? You could ask your kids this too. it might not be as impactful as you and your wife or husband talking about this, but yeah, if your kids come home from school, or when they're done with homeschooling, most of you, like, do they just want to relax and play, and what does that look like? That's not a bad thing to have a conversation with your older kids with. But here's a second task I want you to do. This deals with one of the horsemen. It's kind of a solution to it. Between now and when we start, you should make this list longer. But at minimum, can you write 5 things you appreciate about everyone that lives in your household? And not just write it, but express it to them. Good luck. So everyone that lives in your household, I just want you to write down 5 things you actually appreciate about them. I was telling Kamaria, I actually like how much we laugh together because she doesn't make me laugh a lot. And when we play board games, she cheats. And but I let her cheat because it just makes me laugh. Like her attitude, which is so funny. She'll ask me a question, "Hey, can I do this?" And I'll start answering. She's like, "It doesn't matter. I'm doing it." And I'm just like, "This is ridiculous." She's like, "These rules are stupid." But some of you might, in your attitude towards board games, if you play games together, like, no, you have to follow the rules and the best person wins. For us, it's like, look, we're just here to have fun and hang out together and spend time together. So I don't really care if she cheats a little bit. So sorry for the rest of you if you play board games with my wife and Kamaria cheats. Or she seems frustrated. It's probably because she doesn't know if she can cheat with you. That sounds weird. Don't take that out of context. So I want you to write 5 things you appreciate about your spouse and about each of your kids. You could also this might also help you, some of you too, about yourself. You could do that as well. Oh, dang, that's the hardest one. You might try to reflect on what do you think your spouse appreciates about you. So here's probably, before we get into other topics you guys want to do, because I'm just looking at the clock, we got like 7 minutes. One of the most important things I want you to be mindful of and work on forever is bids for connection. Bids for connection. Successful couples have like a 5-to-1 ratio of positive connections to negative things that happen. That doesn't mean you're just like, oh, I love you. Don't ever sandwich somebody and be like, positive thing, criticism, negative thing. Nobody hears the positive and negative. They just throw that out and they just take the negative. They don't hear the positives. But if you ever want your spouse to hear any criticism or any bad thing, what you're going to do is you have to have a general ratio of 5-to-1. It should be higher probably. But all those are is think about your little kids when they do something and they just come and show it to you. And they're just like, look what I did. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. That's a positive connection that you made with your kid. You don't have to like the thing. You don't have to, you guys parents, you know this. I always laugh at you guys. Like, I see like Maddie and Danae do this to their kids, and it's funny. It makes me laugh. Where it's like, yay, they're really excited. And then you just see their face like, whatever. And it's fine, right? Because as a little kid, they gave you a little drawing. But just show some appreciation there. Or if your spouse comes home, this is a hard one. You have a hard day, your spouse starts complaining about their day, and then you immediately try to correct them. Don't do that. That's not what that's not what they're trying to do with you. They're trying to actually share an emotion, and they just want you to have some empathy with them. And just be like, yeah, I saw this guy at the store today, and he just mean mugged me, and I felt kind of like, ugh. Just be like, wow, that sucks. Like, just connect with them. And be like, yeah, Alyssa, I'm sorry. That's like the 25th time someone's mean mugged you in public. So that's all that is just connect with them. You guys are driving along, and they see something, and you're like, no, I have to not be distracted. Just be like, oh, that's cool. I can't look at that right now because I'm driving, but I'd love to look at that. Or if somebody, comes home and they're having a hard day and you're like, I don't have a solution for them. Usually us guys always struggle with this. And you immediately want to go into the solution. You don't need to do that. Just listen to it and go, wow, that sucks. Sorry to hear that happened today, Lauren. Like, if you want to, I don't know how to solve that situation, right? But then that's just, you've positively connected. You've listened, you've empathized, and then you've said, look, I don't know how to help you, but I think you got this. That's okay too. You can do those kind of things. So they can be sharing negative emotions, experiences, just sharing something. They just want to show you something. Just look at it. Just take 2 seconds out of your day to Be like, oh, that's really cool. I like that you did that, right? Show appreciation and connect with each other. So I want you guys to pay attention to that, because what you'll notice is it'll start changing how you see each other if you positively bid towards connecting. And I swear, you do not have to be interested in the thing that your spouse shares with you to connect with them, right? My wife loves plants. I know nothing about them. But every time she's like, do you see these? I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Your plants are growing. Woo. You do a great job growing plants. I have no idea. Like, they do make the house nicer. I like them, but I have no idea how to take care of any of the plants. So if she ever asked me to take care of the plants, I'll be like, are you ready for them all to die? But, you know, if my wife shows you a plant or wants to engage with you about plants, just be like, oh, that's really cool. I like that you like those. That's just something, noticing and appreciating something about someone else that's different than you. And the weird thing, maybe the hard thing for bidding to connect and appreciating each other, is sometimes we have this weird thing in our head that we want the other person to be ourself, and that's weird. You shouldn't have gotten married if you wanted to marry yourself. Hopefully none of you are like, yes, I want my spouse to be me. No, they're different than you. They complement you. Don't try to make them be you. That means they're going to have different interests and likes and things. Like my mom loves basketball and things. And what's that basketball lady that you really love, Mom? Caitlin Clark. I know nothing about Caitlin Clark. But she shares with Caitlin Clark. Oh, that's cool. Sorry to hear they're out of the playoffs, whatever that is. They didn't make the field goal, I guess. They didn't convert for 2 points. Is that the sport? Wrong sport? Sorry. So you like, if your spouse loves sports, you don't have to love sports. You connecting with them does not mean you love the thing that they love. You just love them and you like that they like that. And you're just like, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing that with me. So that when you do have negative things, it's like a wall against the negative things that come in. That you stop saying, because in your mind creeps in that idea of like, they don't really love me. You're like, actually, no, I know they do. Because they show it in 1,000 ways to me. And this is just a little thing that we got to get over, okay? So what are some things you guys want to cover? Either tools, tricks, things you guys you struggle with. Don't tell me, my spouse struggles with this. By the way, there was a recent study that came out that couples that make fun of each other are much happier. If you make fun of each other. Yeah, Will.
The advice you're giving, I think it's true and makes sense. Where like I struggle with that
Yeah.
is either like it doesn't come to mind to be that way because I feel like
I know.
it's fake.
You feel it's fake?
No, I feel like I'm being fake if
Oh.
I'm showing interest in something I'm not interested in.
Be fake.
Well, that's why I'm saying I struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I struggle with thinking the other person like, you're not really interested in what I'm saying. I'll just not share it with you.
Yeah.
And that's on me.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, so then you have work to fix that, to engage, to make bids for connection, share stuff, and everyone in the house work on appreciating each other, sharing things. Even if it's little, right? Even if you're not interested, because over time, what you just described is like, then you stop sharing, right? You can only get rejected so many times until you just stop trying. And so the inverse is true too. So connect, because if you just keep rejecting each other and rejecting each other, you just stop trying to connect with each other.
I guess I'm kind of on the tail end of that, but I've heard it said from some other guys, like the wives would be interested in things like candles, and somebody that might be further along in their maturity with their marriage and that sort of stuff, immediately gets to the root and says, well, they're important because she's important. So
Yeah.
there's this idea of like, how do you cultivate that sort of mindset for the things that you aren't terribly interested in? So that your knee-jerk response is, the person that I'm dealing with is somebody that has been given to me by God
Yeah.
to cherish and to build up. So how do I keep that mindset up front
Yeah.
instead of the knee-jerk reaction of like, oh man, this is just not my thing?
So I'm writing down like men and women differences, both in interests and the way we talk too, because we talk very differently. So we'll have to talk about that. Oh, yeah. Joshua has to talk about that. I don't know anything about that. Naming your emotions, yeah. Naming and expressing your emotions. With Sarah Steve, is that what you said? Giving them actual names. Other things that come up in your head. You can also, between now and then, text Josh and I as we make a list of things that you guys notice. Obviously, we have a lot of stuff. Josh and I have taught these kind of things for how long? 8, 9 years? Something like that? You, 12? Josh is a counselor as well. So, anything else before we close and let the barbarians in? They are at the gates. I saw one come in. Those are the children, by the way. Anything else you guys think about? Okay. Well, let's close in prayer, and then we'll take a little break before we start our service. Our gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we just ask that as we study and think about implementing changes in our lives, that you, by your Spirit, would keep us in mind to cause those changes in our life, that we might love you more, we might love our spouse and our children, our friends, our family more and more, and show them the love of Christ in our lives, and that others might see that as a faithful witness. Be with us as we come to the worship service and hear and preach the word. And we thank you for the Sabbath day that we can worship you. In Christ's name, amen. All right, if you guys think about stuff, text Josh or I. Oh, and there's a sign up. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Mindy, there's a sign up to watch kids. The idea is that the young mothers are in here, not watching their own kids out there. For the babies. In the nursery. So sign up, it's on band. Thanks.